Now notice one thing that's important for us to recognize when it comes to that particular sin of bitterness, a few things, I might say. One, bitterness has the potential, as the author to the Hebrews instructs us, to defile many. So bitterness is not a sin that will simply affect yourself, but it will affect others. It is an infectious sin. It is a sin that will quickly spread and disease a whole crop. A whole congregation can ultimately be destroyed by one root of bitterness. That's one aspect of the sin of bitterness. But another is this. Often we attempt to assuage our own consciences by justifying our bitterness, saying the reason I'm bitter is because of the great atrocities that have been committed against me by others. And there's a partial truth in that. Most people who are bitter, it is in part due because of the sins of others committed against them. But others sinning against you, in and of itself, alone, if that's all that takes place, it is not enough to produce bitterness. Bitterness does not come merely by being sinned against by others. It is always a mixture of being sinned against by others coupled with pride. Hot spirits, I believe it was Matthew Henry who once said this. Hot spirits come by high spirits. And what he's saying is that to be angry, right? And that's the question that the Lord asked Jonah. Do you do well to be angry? Pro tip, almost always the answer is no. Do you do well to be angry? And what Matthew Henry in his commentary on the book of Jonah is getting at is that high spirits are what lead towards hot spirits. Hot spirits speaking to anger. To be hot in your anger, the opposite of the character of God. Not slow to anger, but quick in your retaliation. Quick in your indignation. And what Matthew Henry is saying is that in the case of Jonah, hot spirits are not merely produced by others harming you, but others harming you coupled with your own high spirits, that is, lofty pride, arrogance. There are people who can be sinned against in terrible ways and yet not grow bitter. Because although they were wronged terribly, they are people who do not think highly of themselves, not more highly than they ought. They are people who do not possess these hot spirits because they possess, by the grace of God, low spirits. It's not just being sinned against, it's being sinned against with pride. It is the prideful man who, when sinned against, will quickly ignite in anger towards those who sinned against him. This is Jonah. And Jonah had, make no mistake, he had in fact been sinned against. And not just that someone didn't invite his kid to their birthday party. No, he had been sinned against by the Assyrians, ramping up their pre-invasion attacks into the northern tribes of Israel, and likely, if not family members, at least acquaintances or friends that he knew had been taken captive or even harmed or brutally murdered by the Assyrians. Not to mention the Assyrians, they also ruined Jonah's perfect prophetic record. His whole profession, his whole career had been flawless. God's going to expand this border. Right? God's going to give you a house. He's going to give you a car. And it's actually true. Right? This is a prosperity preacher's dream. Right? Benny Hinn would kill for this. You know what I mean? This is like, I'm going to tell people that if they do this, they'll be rich. And for the first time, I won't be lying. Right? This is a nice gig. And then all of a sudden, but that other prophet that came before me, he prophesied some bad things. Like Assyria taking over us things. And that's now coming to pass. Oh, man. The Assyrians are hurting people that I love. This golden age of the 80s and the 90s. Right? We're all making just tons of money, selling our kids and grandchildren, their future, on a raft down a river. But And now we're going to have to pay the piper. Isaiah's prophecies are now coming to pass. Those Assyrians. Can't stand them. I had a good thing going. They ruined it. Jonah was sinned against, but he wasn't only sinned against. He was arrogant. He was prideful. He was petty. He probably, like many of us, had an idol of comfort and personal pleasure.